In the early 2010s, Nintendo was having a crisis. The sales of the Wii and DS were on a steady decline, and with the 3DS and Wii U struggling to get off the ground, Nintendo suffered their first annual operating loss in over 30 years. Excitement over the 3DS and Wii U was lower than what Nintendo had hoped for, with the 3DS being criticized as an underpowered system with few games to distinguish it from its increasingly popular mobile competitors, and the Wii U was being viewed cautiously due to its old hardware and the heavy focus on its tablet controller. With the fledgling mobile gaming industry serving to potentially threaten Nintendo's handheld and console businesses, Nintendo started looking towards a new direction for their next generation of hardware, merging their console and handheld development teams and starting work on a new DS model which could also operate as a home console. But as the 3DS took off and the Wii U failed, this concept evolved into something much more than just a new DS model. This is the story of the cancelled 3DS successor and how it evolved into a Nintendo Switch. Welcome to RGD. In February of 2011, the Nintendo 3DS was released. While expectations were high coming off of the immense success of the DS lineup, the console's sales quickly dissipated after launch week. The 3DS was widely criticized for its weak launch lineup and the general lack of compelling games for the first couple years of its life, and while marketing initially focused heavily on the 3D feature, many fans were dissatisfied with its implementation and it quickly fell out of favor as a selling point for the console. This rough start was just a small component of a greater unease amongst Nintendo fans, as the emergence of mobile platforms, the rapidly falling popularity of the Wii and DS, and a downturn in the Japanese game industry raised concern about the future of Nintendo, especially their handheld consoles, which some felt would be uncompetitive in the exploding mobile gaming industry. When Nintendo announced the Wii U at E3 2011, uncertainty immediately started to build as its heavily emphasized tablet controller was seen by many as a poorly conceived attempt to capture the mobile gaming audience, with the actual console barely being shown off at all, causing confusion over whether it was a new console or just another controller for the Wii. As it became clear that the Wii U's tech was more in line with the 360 and PS3 than with their next-gen counterparts, Nintendo fans and industry observers became even more concerned, culminating in a moderately successful but disappointing launch that fell well behind the Wii's. At this point, many of these people felt that Nintendo was in serious danger, with mobile gaming seemingly cutting into the handheld market and taking much of the Wii's casual audience that propelled it to success. But what wasn't publicly known at the time was that Nintendo had already been planning ahead, with a new handheld console having been in development since at least mid-2012, along with a new business strategy revealed in early 2013 that would combine their handheld and home console hardware development teams to better integrate the architecture of Nintendo's console lineups, allowing for easier game porting and cost savings. While the only public statement about this handheld was a brief mention by Miyamoto in June of 2012, the Nintendo Gig Leak revealed many technical documents which allow us to piece together its specifications and development history. One of the Gig Leak archives includes a large set of documents from Nintendo's anti-piracy team, including detailed technical information about the software and hardware of many Nintendo and non-Nintendo platforms. This information was used during the development of the Nintendo Switch to help design its DRM systems. One of the platforms covered in this archive is a handheld referred to as the INDY, a codename which reappears several times throughout the documentation and seems to have been part of a lineage of early 2010s Nintendo handheld codenames that include the new 3DS's codename Snake and the new 3DS XL's codename Closer. While the information is primarily focused on topics like encryption and cartridge copy protection, the large volume of documents included gives us lots of general information about the INDY as it evolved over the course of 3 years. The INDY was initially conceptualized as a mostly straightforward 3DS successor, with a key feature being the ability to wirelessly cast games to a TV using the Miracast protocol. While Nintendo had previously experimented with the idea of allowing handheld games to be played on a TV with the Super Game Boy and Game Boy Player, Nintendo hadn't yet made a handheld with a TV output feature, although it was possibly in the works for the DS Lite. Combined with a decently powerful chipset that would allow the INDY to play downscaled versions of Wii U games, Nintendo was using the INDY as a push into the concept of making a hybrid console that could both run versions of console games on the go and run handheld games on a TV. The final Switch likely used a wired docking solution instead due to latency issues, as the Miracast protocol doesn't have a consistent standard for handling latency, leading to an inconsistent experience and potentially severe lag on some TVs. The docking concept actually had some precedence, as leaked documents dating to the mid-2000s showed that Nintendo was designing a portable GameCube which had the same docking idea as the Switch, right down to the same internal name of Cradle for both consoles' docks. Some of the early planning documents for the Wii even mentioned the idea of creating a portable version within a few years, implying that Nintendo might have wanted to merge their handheld and home console architectures much earlier than was publicly known about before. The earliest iteration of the Indy used hardware similar to that of the 3DS, but with a new SoC from Sharp, the same company responsible for the 3DS SoC. This chip would have 4 ARM Cortex-A9 cores similarly to the PS Vita, along with a new GPU from DMP, the same company behind the 3DS GPU. This iteration, known in various places throughout the files as both the Indy and the Next, appears to have gotten along far enough to have early development boards made for it, before being scrapped for unknown reasons by mid-2013 in favor of a new iteration with a new SoC developed in collaboration with the Swiss company STMicroelectronics, a chip manufacturer which at the time had a fairly prolific mobile SoC business through their joint venture ST Ericsson. This new SoC, codenamed Mont Blanc, was a derivative of ST's existing smartphone chips with one key difference. Rather than going with a pre-made graphics chip such as PowerVR or Mali, the Mont Blanc was intended to use a custom GPU known as the Decaf Latte. This name originates from the Wii U, which was codenamed Project Cafe. The Latte is the name of the chip in the console that contains its GPU, so the Decaf Latte name indicates that the Indy's GPU was basically the Wii U GPU taken out of the Wii U and repurposed for a handheld console. Its early testing was done by using a special version of the Wii U's GPU on a PCIe card attached to an ARM development board. This aligned perfectly with Nintendo's aforementioned strategy to merge its handheld and console development, allowing them to carry over their existing technical knowledge and tools from the Wii U for easier porting of Wii U games, and to maintain their existing vendor relationship with AMD, who made the Wii U's GPU. This GPU would have run at 139 to 370 MHz depending on power needs, compared to the 550 MHz used in the Wii U itself. Satoru Iwata hinted at this approach in February of 2014 when he mentioned that Nintendo's next system was going to absorb the Wii U architecture. This would continue Nintendo's lineage of graphics hardware stretching back as far as the N64's conception in 1993, as the N64's GPU team created a startup company called ArtX in 1997, which then developed the GameCube's GPU, and was then bought out by ATI, which developed the Wii's GPU largely based on ArtX's previous work. ATI was then bought out by AMD, with Nintendo maintaining their relationship and having them develop the Wii U's GPU based on Radeon technology. The Indy now used a quad-core 1GHz ARM Cortex-A53 CPU, which was widely used in mobile products throughout the 2010s and is often used today in embedded devices and as an efficiency core in some smartphones. Even the Nintendo Switch has A53 cores, although they're disabled and can't normally be used. The Indy was planned to have a gigabyte of RAM, putting it between the 3DS's 128MB and the Wii U's 2GB. The overall technical goal for the Indy was to have it running downscaled Wii U games, with various tests being performed on games like Mario Kart 8 to see how they could be adapted for the Indy's lower resolution and constrained specs. The Indy was going to carry over most of the 3DS's major features, such as game cartridges, dual displays with a touchscreen and 3D screen, motion sensors, 3D cameras, Street Pass and Spot Pass, and AR. Several new features were planned, many of which seem to be utilizing tech from ST's mobile SoCs, such as USB, Bluetooth, GPS, and cellular connectivity, along with a video encoder that would handle the aforementioned TV casting along with game recording and in-game video calls. The super stable 3D feature of the new 3DS was also seemingly originally planned for the Indy, with Miyamoto asking for it to be included in the new 3DS instead after seeing a prototype. The ability to allow any Indy to be permanently converted into a development kit by burning a digital fuse was also being considered. It's unclear if this was intended as an actual user feature of the console or if it was just meant to allow for easier dev kit manufacturing. It's possible that was related to Nintendo's indie developer outreach initiatives that they were heavily emphasizing at the time, which gave prospective developers access to a limited set of Wii U development tools for a discounted price to encourage the development of original eShop titles at a time when the Wii U was struggling from a lack of game releases. As was typical for Nintendo handhelds at the time, backwards compatibility of the 3DS was also planned via a dedicated chip. As development of the Indy progressed into late 2013, its direction began to shift. In November of 2013, the Indy specifications were updated to make it no longer have a second screen, indicating a shift away from the DS lineup and towards the Indy being its own standalone product. The new plans called for a single 480p screen running at up to 120Hz. In February of 2014, this was then updated to a single 800p screen running at the standard 60Hz, giving it a resolution slightly exceeding the final Switch's. A planning sheet from around the same time as the removal of the second screen in late 2013 gives us an idea of Nintendo's release schedule at the time. This sheet lists the new 3DS's release date of late 2014, along with a projected release date of late 2015 for the Indy. Interestingly, there was also an unknown device known as the WUIH planned for mid-2014. References in the Wii U's operating system indicate that this would have been a new revision of the Wii U with its own development kit, implying that would have major hardware changes. It's unclear what this device actually was, but one possibility is that it was an upgraded Wii U planned for release around the time of the new 3DS. A 2017 interview of Nintendo executive Shinya Takahashi confirms that by the start of 2014, the idea of the Indy as a fully hybrid console had solidified, along with what would become the Switch's Joy-Cons. And by the middle of the year, a name for the product had been conceived: the Nintendo Switch. After this, Nintendo experimented more with different console form factors using the same Mont Blanc chip, culminating in an August 2014 proposal for an oval-shaped handheld featuring two sticks cut into a 480p screen and no face buttons, with a focus on tactile feedback and having game elements appear around the sticks. Nintendo patented this concept, which later became infamous due to a fake Switch leak based on the patent. This calls back to Iwata's statement from February of 2014, mentioning that with Nintendo's new integrated console architecture, they could experiment with different device form factors which could all still run the same games. But as the year went on, a major shakeup occurred. As early as April of 2014, Nintendo began considering using an off-the-shelf SoC for some of their products. Eventually, Nintendo began to seriously evaluate changing the new console's chip yet another time, this time to a new SoC from Nvidia known as the Tegra X1, which was still in development at the time. This was actually the second time Nvidia had worked with Nintendo on a mobile SoC after an earlier attempt during the 3DS's development. The Tegra X1 chip offered performance around that of the Wii U, which would allow Nintendo to supersede both the 3DS and the Wii U with one console. Nintendo had some concerns about adopting the Tegra, as while the Mont Blanc SoC was designed from the ground up to implement extensive DRM measures, including anti-glitching protections to combat mod chips, the Tegra lacked these features. Going with the Nvidia chip also meant that Nintendo would be moving away from their 21-year lineage of GPU technology. This was in stark contrast to the strategy previously proposed by Iwata that was intended to build all of Nintendo's future consoles off of the base of the Wii U's architecture. But Nvidia appears to have valued the potential contract with Nintendo so much that they improved the Tegra's security and began work on a custom graphics API before the contract was even signed. With the Tegra X1 presenting an opportunity for Nintendo to make the Switch a full successor to both of its product lines, and to take their strategy of combining handheld and console hardware to its logical extreme, Nintendo switched over. Work on the Mont Blanc-based Switch continued as late as December of 2014 and potentially into the very start of 2015, but by March of 2015 the Nvidia deal was finalized and Nintendo announced their new NX platform with a new codename to internally separate it from the Indy. A tentative release date of late 2016 was set, with prototype hardware quickly emerging from existing Tegra X1 development boards. This marked the beginning of a major transitional period for Nintendo, as the passing of Satoru Iwata later that year, followed by the merging of Nintendo's development divisions, shifted their approach to hardware and software development. As for what became of the Indy, references in some of the SoC's technical documents indicate that it went through multiple chip steppings, a term used in the industry to refer to multiple revisions of the physical design of a chip. Combined with a message stating that the SoC was in full production, it seems likely that multiple revisions of the chip were manufactured before the project's cancellation. However, it's unclear how close the Indy got to being a complete game console, or if it ever got into the hands of game developers. There's also a small remnant of the Indy's tech in the final Switch, as its cartridge copy protection chip was originally developed for the Indy. STMicroelectronics also makes the Switch's NFC reader chip, showing that they didn't totally fall out with Nintendo after the Indy. With the Switch marking a new era for Nintendo, it's interesting to take a look back at the circumstances that led to its creation and piece together the many alternate possibilities that could have happened during its development. For more information about lost pieces of gaming and tech history, check out the RGD Twitter at RareGamingDump and the RGD website at raregamingdump.ca. We hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you next time.